All right, so we are looking at 1.6. 1.6 is absolute value. Okay, we were talking about absolute value. Everybody know what absolute value actually represents? What absolute value represents here? Sam? Yeah, the distance from 0 on a number line. Okay, absolute value is the distance from 0 on a number line. That's the definition of absolute value. Distance from 0 on a number line. The key word there is distance. That keyword distance is the one that tells us that our answer is always going to be positive. Because distances are positive. You can't have a negative distance. You can't have a negative length. Right? You cannot run -3 miles. Can't do it. Right? You can run 3 miles backwards, sure. That's still 3 miles. You're just doing it in a really weird way. Okay? So you cannot have a negative distance. You can't have a pencil that's -3 inches long. It doesn't work. So distance is positive. That's why absolute value is always positive. We talk about that as a warm-up, right? We talk about whatever's on the inside of the absolute value becomes positive. Right? Now, there is a difference between this and this, right? These two problems are different. Remember, we have to solve what's inside the absolute value first before we take the absolute value. Absolute value does not just automatically make every number inside of it positive. But you got to simplify what's on the inside first. So in here, this is the absolute value of -1, which is 1. Down here, absolute value of 8 is 8. Absolute value of 9 is 9. Then we subtract, gives us a -1. So it's important to do things in the right order. Okay. Once you're simplifying, you got to do everything inside the absolute value first, then take the absolute value. Then you can deal with anything that's outside. So when we're looking at like order of operations wise, treat absolute value like parentheses. You got to do that first. Okay. Whatever's on the inside, do it first. Then we can take the absolute value. Then we can deal with all the rest of the stuff that's on the outside. Okay. All right. Any questions on just our basics of absolute value? That's just the basics. Okay, so you're gonna see a couple questions. First 4 or 5 questions on the homework are gonna be just like that, just simplifying. Okay. But the main idea of what we're looking at in this chapter or this lesson section is solving equations that have absolute value. Okay. So, those no. Unless you're getting them wrong, then for those, yeah. You're getting them wrong, then we're going to start showing work out. All right. So we're going to start looking at equations with absolute value. Okay, this is something different. We haven't done this before. Okay, this is brand new stuff. So let's say that I have the absolute value of something is equal to 5. Absolute value of some number is equal to 5. Raise your hand and tell me what is my answer. What is X going to be here? What's X going to be?
5.
5. Okay, that's one of my answers. Or -5. So absolute value, we're going to have 2 answers for every problem. Okay, we're going to have 2 answers because we know the absolute value of 5 is 5, but the absolute value of -5 is also 5. Okay, so our 2 answers here, 5 and -5. Okay. Is it?
You have to add them both.
You gotta write them both. Yep. You gotta write them both.
Wait, homework.
Yep. Homework, test, you gotta write them both. Okay, so now that we understand that we are going to have 2 answers because there are 2 possibilities for what's on the inside, let's take it one step further. Let's go now, the absolute value of X plus 2 is equal to 5. But we know what's on the inside of that absolute value has to either equal 5 or negative 5. So we are going to split this up into two different equations. Okay, two different equations. One time I'm going to take whatever's inside the absolute value and make it equal 5. The other time I'm going to take what's inside the absolute value and make it equal negative 5. Just like we did over there. Right? But now instead of just an x, I've got x plus 2. So we're saying that x plus 2, what's inside the absolute value, can either equal 5 or negative 5. And then we solve them both. Yep. So this is, again, one where we have to show work now, even though they're basic questions, they are going to get harder. Okay, we solve them both, we get our answer. So it's just subtract 2, nice and easy. Subtract 2, careful of your negatives, and we get our 2 answers. Okay, we're going to have 2 answers for all of our questions. Okay, we split it up. One side, the other side. Okay, any questions on this? Our very basic question here before we move on and make it a little hard. Okay. So let's go. Absolute value of 3x minus 4 is equal to 9. Tell the person next to you what the 2 equations are going to be that you're going to write down. Okay, and then go ahead and write those down. It's all. You're going to end up with fractions, completely fine.
Yeah.
I'll just need a calculator on it.
That's what you want to select. That's the best fractions.
I'll do it just like that. If you want to change it to 4 1/3, that's fine, but 13/3 is perfectly fine. Good. Okay, so we see our work up there, right? We split it up one time, it equals a positive 9, one time equals a negative 9. We solve it out, we get our 2 answers. I didn't do a great job of making them even or whole numbers, but it's so. One thing to point out here, we did not change this to a positive just because it's in an absolute value, right? We're taking whatever's on the inside, it's staying the same for both equations. We're not changing this at all. The only thing we're changing between our 2 equations is the number on the other side, what it's equal to. One time positive, one time negative. Okay, the left side is going to be the same on both. Right side is what we're changing. Okay, good deal. Questions on that? Okay. So let's look at something important here. This one's slightly different. Okay, slightly different. Raise your hand and tell me what's different about this. What's different this time, Denver? Okay, there's that extra step, that minus 12, right? So here's the deal though. Before we split it up into our two equations, you have to get the absolute value by itself. Okay? The absolute value has to be by itself before we can split it up. So we are not making this equal 3 and negative 3. You will get one of those two equations wrong. Okay? We have to get rid of this minus 12. We got to get rid of that first. The absolute value has to be by itself before we split it up. That is the number one most common mistake tonight on the homework. Absolute value has to be by itself first before we split it up. Thank you to those of you that found that important enough to write down something about it. Absolute value has to be by itself first before we can split it up, which means my first step here, I have to add 12 to both sides. Once I add that 12 to both sides, now I have the absolute value by itself. Now I can split it up, one with a positive 15, one with a negative 15. You cannot do that. You cannot split it up until the absolute value is by itself. Which means let's say I adjust this, right? Let's say I have a 5 on the outside. I still have to get rid of that 5. I'm not going to get rid of that 5 by distributing. I got to divide by 5. This is times 5. I got to divide by 5. I got to get rid of it. I'm not touching the absolute value until I split it up. Everything else needs to go away. So I got times 5. I'm going to divide by 5. So I'm going to get here. Now I can split that up. Right? Sorry for changing problem. So
Which one do you want us to do?
doesn't matter. I'm not going to finish solving it anyway. I was just pointing some stuff out. Got to get that absolute value by itself first. Okay. That is important. Okay. Make sure you have that written down somewhere. Absolute value by itself first before you start splitting it up. And if you start getting stuff wrong tonight, you're at home, you're getting it wrong, you don't understand why. Hopefully you look back at your notes and you see that and you're like, oh yeah, I got to do that. I got to get that absolute value by itself first. I'm telling you, that is the number one mistake tonight. All right, where we at? Write it down. Don't solve it. Just write it down. Just write it down. Don't solve it. Just write it down. All right. On this problem, I can jump right to the answer. Why?
No, it's just a. Oh, yeah. It's already by itself.
Okay. I'm not going to split it up into two equations.
One's already.
I'm not going to do any work.
One's already.
Talk to the person next to you. Talk to the person next to you right now. And tell them, why is this no solution? Figure it out. Why is it no solution?
Oh, because it can't equal -2. Because it's a -2. It can't equal -2 persistence.
No, but the X can be there.
Jeez.
Yeah, but
Why are you so grumpy? I was not here yesterday. Just passed. I wasn't. Ugh.
Okay. Raise your hand and tell me, why is this no solution? Elizabeth, why is this no solution? Exactly. Absolute value cannot equal a negative. It's impossible. You can't take the absolute value of something and make it equal -2. You can't do it. So anytime you have that absolute value by itself equals a negative, your answer is no solution. You don't have to keep solving. Don't keep solving. I had somebody first hour come up to me on the homework with 4 lines of work shown. And they're like, I don't know where I went wrong. And I just went back to the original and I pointed that out. And I said, your answer is no solution.
So you gave him the answer?
Well, I pointed it out. He told me there was no solution after I circled the negative.
Oh.
I'm not in the habit of giving answers. Okay, so it has to be the absolute value by itself still though, right? So, for example, if I have something like this. Oh, that's not it. This one,
Then you can solve.
right? This I cannot solve. There is no solution to this. But before I can realize it's no solution, I got to get that absolute value by itself. I subtract that 5. Now I've got absolute value equals a negative, no solution. Right? Got to get the absolute value by itself first before you either split it up or it's no solution. Super important to get that absolute value by itself first. I've said it like 15 times already in this class. Absolute value by itself first. All right. Video questions on that, on no solution? Remind the person next to you, why are these no solution?
That's what I mean.
All right, last thing that we're looking at today. Okay, and then we'll finish up this lesson on Monday, remember? Last thing we're looking at today. I'm gonna look at the relationship between the question and absolute value equation and the answers and how we can go back and forth between the two actually. Because what's gonna happen is they're gonna give you the two answers and they're gonna say, write the equation for this. We're gonna be able to go backwards. Let me show you how it's done. Okay. First of all, let's look at, we'll look at this problem. Absolute value of x plus 2 is equal to 5. Why don't you go ahead and solve that real quick. Split it up into your 2, solve it. One with positive 5, one with a negative 5. I think we did this one, didn't we?
Yeah.
Great, should have the answer to that. Okay, so we got 3, I forgot. We got 3 and we got negative 7, right? Now, when you do these types of problems on the homework tonight, they are gonna have you graph them on a number line. Sounds scary? It's not. They're gonna have a number line there. Negative 7, let's see, negative 7. This is bigger than I wanted it to be. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3. So they're going to give you this number line. And if they want you to graph the answers, all that means is putting a dot over negative 7 and a dot over 3. That's it. All right. You just click the 2 dots. You don't have to draw that on your homework tonight. Right. Just put it on the computer. Okay. That's what it's looking for. So now, what I want to do with this last example that we're talking about. So I want to look at the relationship between the numbers in my problem and the graph and my answers. Okay. This is a tricky one because it shows 2 here. I want you to think instead a negative 2. What relationship, where is a negative 2 in relation to negative 7 and 3? Looking at that number line, where is the negative 2 in relation to the negative 7 and the 3? Bishop?
5 away from each.
5 away from each. It's in the exact middle. It's in the exact middle. So that negative 2 is in the exact middle. And Bishop even said the next one that I was going to ask is that it's 5 away from each side. 5 away from each side. Looking at our problem, that 5, that's the 5. It's 5 away from each side. The negative 2 is right here. Okay, now I know it looks like a positive. Here's the general relationship between the two. And I probably should have made this a negative to start, but the general relationship between an equation and the answer, it's always going to be the absolute value of x minus the middle number. X minus the middle number. The middle number here was a -2, right?
Yeah, just subtract.
Minus a negative is like adding to. That's why it's a plus there. Okay, so it's always x minus the middle number is equal to the distance away from the middle number. So the absolute value of x minus the middle number is equal to the distance away from the middle number. This can be a little confusing at first. Okay, but make sure you have this down. We'll look at one more example of it, and then I'll have you practice it in the homework.
Well, I like no limit for my paper.
Find a spot. There. So the absolute value of x minus the middle number is equal to the distance away from the middle number. So the example that I'm going to give, okay, we're going to have two answers. I'm going to have my two answers are x is equal to 50 and x is equal to 100. And I want to create the equation that's going to give me these two answers. So my equation is always going to be x minus the middle number. What is the number that's exactly halfway in between 50 and 100, Sam? 75. So I know that's going to be x minus 75 in absolute value is equal to the distance away from the middle number. So how far away are each of these from that 75? 25. That's my equation. If we were to solve that equation, we would get our two answers as 50 and 100. Okay, so that's the relationship that we kind of have to know. You're going to see a couple word problems, or at least one word problem, where they give you the answers, they want the equation. They'll give you a couple more where they give you the equation, they want the solutions. They're just going to go back and forth between. Okay, we're going to do our best on it. Okay, see what we can do. We'll go over it tomorrow before we take that math test. Okay, all right.